I feel is an important part of 80s cinema because there's so many connections to other films that are hailed as classics or cult classics because of the actors involved in this.
Welcome to the Video Store Geek Podcast, where your friendly neighborhood world film geek Albert Valentine talks about films made and released during the golden age of the VHS era.
Hey everyone, this is your friendly neighborhood. This episode of the Video Store Geek Podcast. I know we're a day late today, but it's within good reason. As you guys know, I was in New York last week on some personal and family stuff going on, so we're back. But as you guys probably heard on March 19th, we lost an icon, and that icon is none other than Chuck Norris. So, in his memory, I decided to cover one of his films for this episode of the Video Store Geek podcast. And this is probably one of the most well-known films he's known for. We're going to talk about The Octagon, released in 1980, directed by Eric Carson, written by Lee Chapman, based on a story by Lee Chapman and Paul Aaron. Stars Chuck Norris, Lee Van Cleef, Karen Carlson, Art Hindle, Tadashi Yamashita, and Carol Bagdasarian. This is a pretty good movie. This is actually one of the first. This is before the whole. This is like the precursor of the 1980s Ninja Craze that it hit thanks to Cannon's Enter the Ninja. This came out a year before that. But it's about an American who was raised by a Japanese family, and years later, he is forced to confront his adopted brother, who has formed an organization of ninjas called the Octagon. They're a group of international terrorists. So we're going to get right into things, and we're going to get some fun facts about this because there's quite a few fun facts about this particular movie. And let's just get right into it. So the film opens up with the Octagon. It's a secret military camp. It's led by both Katsumoto and Sakura. Sakura is our lead villain here, played by Tadashi Yamashita. They raise ninjas, but they also raise terrorists. And soon enough, there's a mission where the terrorists attack a diplomat, and they ultimately kill him with one survivor of the whole ordeal. In the meantime, we have a retired karate champion, Scott James. He's attending a dance performance where he sees the head dancer, Nancy, played by, if I remember right, let me see who played her, but I'll get right to that in a second. Anyway, she's doing this little dance, and Kim Langford is Nancy in this. That's it. And she's doing a dance that meshes dancing and martial arts. And it's kind of like reminds me of the movie Dancing Warrior that came out years later in Taiwan. Anyway, he's all impressed with it, and he's with his buddy AJ, who's also like a martial arts champion, played by Art Hindle, who a year later will be probably become an icon himself in the role of a cop in the Porky's trilogy. Um, can't remember the name of the character offhand, but he's the cop whose brother got into serious trouble. And anyway, back to the Octagon. Excuse me for going off topic here. Scott invites Nancy to dinner, and when after dinner they go back to her house, and he realizes the lights are off, and he starts to suspect something's happening because you start to hear this inner voice within Scott. He realizes that there's these ninjas, and they start getting attacked. Scott fights them off, but however, Nancy and her family are massacred. That's what happened. That's why the lights were off, because Nancy's family was massacred, and Nancy fell victim to the ninjas as well. So Scott has no clue what's going on. He realizes something's not right. So he turns to an old friend of his named McCarn, played by Lee Van Cleef, who would play a ninja himself 4 years later in the Master series. And of course, as soon as he mentions ninjas, McCarn believes that it's actually terrorists, and he invites Scott to join his anti-terrorist group, which he wants nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, AJ eventually falls into McCarn's group, and it kind of leads to a little distinction between the friends, him and Scott. They get into a little rivalry, but not like martial arts rivalry, but like the friendship is tested pretty much throughout this whole ordeal because of what's going on. But Anyway, Scott meets this wealthy woman named Justine, and basically she's been targeting terrorist leaders through her publications because her dad was killed by the same terrorist group months ago, because he had published about these terrorist groups, and when they told him to shut up and he refused, they killed him. So she's now pretty much carrying on his legacy by doing the same thing, but she's going to need some help. So Scott decides, at first out of pity, but then realizing, this is a very dangerous situation, he decides to help her. Um, and then he soon learns that the terrorist group and the ninjas are one and the same, and they run a military camp called the Octagon. And eventually, in the meantime, as we're getting flashbacks of these, we see little glimpses of what the terrorist group do. They're training and stuff. Aside from Yamashiro and Sakura, we have a masked ninja named Kyo, and you don't see his face at all. Like he's totally covered, kind of like Death Dealer in Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings. You don't know who it is, but I will tell you who's going to play that character in our fun facts section here. But meanwhile, AJ soon discovers that Scott's brother Sakura is one of the guys in charge of the Octagon and the terrorist group. And he believes Scott should go after him, but Scott still has some doubts. And unfortunately, when he's out to protect Justine, as AJ's trying to leave, a blow dart gun, a guy is hiding out with a blow dart gun. He kills Justine with a poison dart. And the identity of that killer is also going to be revealed in our fun fact section because this guy would go on to become an actor and stuntman himself later on. So I'll bring that up in our fun fact session because it's very important because this movie does have a connection to one of the greatest cult classics of the 80s, and I'll bring that up soon. And it's going to be a future episode of this podcast. But anyway, after Justine's death, Scott realizes the only way he's going to have to try to stop him. And the one who's going to help him out here is a woman named Aura who was training at the Octagon, but feels like she starts to realize their true intentions and she's not happy with it. And Aura is played by Carol Bagdasarian. So ultimately, Scott decides to help her and they hatch a plan along with first McLaren and AJ want to do it on their own. But when Scott tries to tell AJ, these guys are more dangerous, you're not going to be able to defend them, AJ refuses to listen. He's that one best friend who wants to do the action and then when he gets called out on he's gonna try to go lone wolf, and of course what happens, he gets kidnapped by the Octagon guy. So Scott now has to go in dressed all in black except for the mask and just start whipping some ninja ass. That's what he does throughout the last like 15 minutes of the movie, and it's also going to lead to a showdown with his adopted brother. So that's pretty much the gist of the movie. I love this movie. I decided to revisit it in memory of Chuck. Chuck is was one of the greatest of all time. Um, this guy was like this guy was like he's like G.I. Joe. He was the American hero in my book. And I wanted to do this episode to honor him because I grew up watching Chuck Norris for so many years on VHS. Used to go to the video store and we would rent like Invasion USA and some of these other films. And I thought about covering those, but ultimately I decided to go with the Octagon because I had not covered it. I don't think I've ever covered it in my years of writing. So I wanted to do something a little different. And we're not going to do some fun facts with this film. And this one's going to be, some of them are kind of mind blowing when it comes to 80s cinema because this, I feel, is an important part of 80s cinema because there's so many connections to other films that are hailed as classics or cult classics because of the actors involved in this. So we're going to get right into this right away with the fun facts. So here we go. As mentioned, Lee Van Cleef starred in The Master, and he's in this movie with Chuck Norris. He plays a ninja, an American-raised ninja who goes back to look for his daughter. So that's quite interesting that he would himself play a ninja. He plays like an anti-terrorist group leader. And of course, Lee Van Cleef was known for westerns. And who would have thought that 4 years, like five, yeah, 4 years after the Octagon, he would star in his own ninja series, The Master, that only ran for 13 seasons. And co-star was Timothy Van Patten, who played his protege, the always trouble-seeking Max. And Demi Moore would be in the pilot episode, in one of the episodes as well. I think she played the daughter of Lee Van Cleef's character, if I remember right. So there's that. In the flashbacks, we see an 8-year-old Sakura and Scott, but then we see an 18-year-old Sakura and Scott. Now, the 18-year-olds are very important because Chuck Norris's own son Michael, who would become his own, he would become a filmmaker and actor in his own right. He would actually follow in his dad's footsteps, literally when he took over as one of the supporting cast members of Delta Force 3 in 1991. He would star in a film called Mind Ripper, and then he became an actor on his own. I believe he directed a film called Amerigeddon in the 2010s. So he plays the 18-year-old Scott. Playing the 18-year-old Sakura is Brian Tochi. And if you don't know that name, think of films like Revenge of the Nerds, where he played Takashi, Police Academy 3 and 4, where he played Nagata. And Tochi would also appear in an episode of The Master with Lee Van Cleef, but he would also be known as the voice of Leonardo in the 1990 to 1993 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action trilogy. He would be the voice of Leonardo. So Tochi himself is connected to the whole ninja world, right? Tadashi Yamashita, who plays Sakura, would go on to play another villainous ninja, the Black Star Ninja, 5 years later in American Ninja. Funny enough, Chuck Norris was originally offered the role of Joe Armstrong, the American Ninja, but it's been perceived and it's never been proven that he didn't want to do it because he had to wear a mask. Ultimately, they went with Michael Dudikoff. And of course, the rest is history with that. Now, as for who plays Kyo, our masked ninja henchman of Sakura and Katsumoto, it's played by Richard Norton, who passed away last year in March. The guy is a martial arts legend. I can't say enough about Richard Norton either. We're going to cover some of his films down the road on this podcast, but we got to talk about this one because he actually doesn't have one role. He has two. He only not only does he play Kyo, but he's part of a group of rednecks that work in cahoots with the Octagon, and his character is called Longlegs, and he looks so funny. I'm sorry, I don't want to dishonor Richard Norton because of, I mean, the guy has an amazing legacy, but he had one of the funniest looks in this movie. I'm talking beach blonde platinum hair with a dark mustache, and it looked kind of funny. But his character is called Long Legs in this. And I'm not talking to Nicolas Cage serial killer either. I had to put that little joke in. But another of these rednecks is named Hatman, and he's played by Chuck's brother Aaron, who would go on to be his fight choreographer for about 2.5 decades. From they started together in a force of one, and then Aaron and Chuck actually did the fight choreography on this film. But then Aaron would become Chuck's fight choreographer shortly after that. So all of Chuck Norris's fights that you see, yeah, he had a hand in them, but they were also choreographed by Aaron. So that's very important on that. Another thing you should know is I mentioned the blow dart gun assassin who kills Justine, and he's played by a future actor and stuntman himself named John Barrett. If you don't know who John Barrett is, check out films like Jim Cotta, Merchants of War. He actually went to South Africa for a few years to do movies. So he's in films like Merchants of War. He was in a film called Hunk, where he had a brief appearance as a lifeguard, but he actually was a stunt coordinator too. He stunt coordinated that movie, Hunk. He was the stunt coordinator on Merchants of War, but his most well-known role in front of the cameras was 1990's American Kickboxer, where he was the star of the film. He also came up with a story, and it's basically about a kickboxing champion on the verge of, at the top of his game, accidentally killed someone at a party, and after a 12-month sentence, he finds himself having to redeem himself, not just in the ring when he faces off against an old enemy, but redeem himself as a person, and that's what the film was about. And this, if you haven't seen American Kickboxer, I highly recommend it. Even though it's a martial arts film, there's people out there who don't like martial arts, but there are people out there who like redemption films. This to me is one of the ultimate redemption films, American Kickboxer. So go check that out. Art Hindle will go on to play Mickey. That's his name. I just got his name now. Mickey in the Porky's trilogy. And here he's supposed to be playing a martial artist. And I don't really get to see Art fight in this movie. Very rarely. And there's also a character named Quinine who has a brief conversation with AJ about Scott, and he's played by future Ghostbuster Ernie Hudson. So that's something to look at as well. And Tracy Walter, who will go on to play Joker's henchman Bob in Batman, has an uncredited role as Beatty, kind of a recruiter of sorts for the Rednecks and the Octagon. So he's kind of involved with that. So yeah, so those are like a lot of fun facts of this movie. And there's one more I need to mention. Aura's actress, Carol Bagdasarian. If that name is not familiar to you, Bagdasarian, she is the daughter of Ross Bagdasarian, who created Alvin and the Chipmunks. So, of course, the company is now run by her brother Ross Jr. and sister-in-law Janice Carmen. They're the ones in charge of the whole Chipmunk legacy now. Not much is known about Carol after she's done a few films and then never really heard from her again. No, don't know what she's up to these days. If anyone wants to comment on that, please do. If you know what's going on with her today. Um, Kim Langford, who plays Nancy, went on to retire and form a focus on the equestrian world. She believes she runs a horse ranch these days, and she gives like lessons and stuff like that. So I think that's what she's doing nowadays because that's the last thing I checked. But yeah, I can't say enough about the Octagon. This is one of the best Chuck Norris movies ever made, in my opinion. So I'm giving this an A plus. I got it as it's definitely a classic Chuck Norris movie. Oh, and I do have one more fun fact. Playing Scott and Sakura's master is the late John Fujioka, who would also play the mentor of the American Ninja. So yeah, this movie has a lot of ninja connections. So I gotta mention that. But yeah, the Octagon is getting an A plus. Of course, you can see it on my favorite streaming service right now, Tubi, as well as others. It's out on Blu-ray, DVD, I'm pretty sure. Find it on physical media. But if you love Chuck Norris or if you want to get someone into Chuck Norris films, I believe this is the perfect film to start that for people who want to check out Chuck Norris's work. And once again, my condolences go out to the Norris family. As like I said, I idolize this guy forever, and I actually um, also know he has one more film that he had made before his passing, and I believe it's going to be out this fall, and it's called Zombie Plane. He plays like a parody of himself alongside Vanilla Ice, Sophie Monk, and Ice-T, and those bunch of those guys. You can check out his last film currently, Agent Recon on Tubi and other streaming services. If you haven't been on the Indie World Cinema channel yet, Agent Recon, I actually interviewed Derek Ting, the writer, director, and star of the film, and he had some great things to say about Chuck Norris in our interview. So go check that out, the Indie World Cinema YouTube channel. Mark Singer as well. When I interviewed him, he had some nice stuff to say about Chuck. And yeah, Chuck, I know you're up there watching, down on the whole world. And this is dedicated to you. And thank you for the memories and giving us some of the greatest action films of the 80s, including this one. And I'm going to mention the next film already because I already decided what it's going to be. We are returning to our regular Monday schedule. So our next episode is going to be one of the two films that inspired the Raspberries Awards or the Razzies. And I'm doing this in memory of another actress who just passed yesterday. Um, the next episode is going to be Can't Stop the Music from 1980. And this is going to be in memory of Valerie Perrine. As you might know, as you haven't heard, if you haven't heard it, she passed away yesterday, March 23rd, at the age of 82 from complications from Parkinson's. And of course, she's known for playing Eve Tessmacher in Superman 1 and 2. She's You've probably seen her cameo as a state trooper in Cannonball Run, but this was her big film. This was like a faux biopic on the Village People. So we're going to be covering that film on the next episode of the Video Store Geek podcast in memory of Valerie Perrine. So that's it for now. Check out indieworldcinema.com for the latest in reviews and films and interviews. Go to the YouTube channel, Indie World Cinema on YouTube, for our indie chat conversations. And just recently, last week, I went to Trauma. Check out my video of the Trauma tour on there. And keep listening to the Video Store Geek podcast on YouTube and Spotify. You can also hear Indie Chat on YouTube and Spotify as well. And yep, that's it for me for now. And this is your indie film geek, Albert Valentin, telling you all to stay awesome as always.
Thank you for listening to the Video Store Geek podcast. Don't forget to check out worldfilmgeek.com for the latest reviews, interviews, and news in the world of indie and global cinema. And see you on the next episode of the podcast. Stay awesome, film geeks.